Hello and welcome to the show, Paranormal Fact or Fiction. This is the only show anywhere on the planet that we look to separate the mystery from the history, the urban myths from the urban myth, the truth or scare. What's true, what's bunk? We will find out during the course of this episode.
I'm Wesley Johnson. Every week I will pick a haunted location. I will scour the internet for all the stories and information that it has to offer, and we will determine if it's fact or fiction.
I will then use my historical research skills and the paranormal investigations I've done extensively in that building with my team, the International Paranormal Society, to discover whether it's cool or it's bull. We're ably assisted on our journey by the bunk bell. Every time Wesley reads out a statistic or fact that isn't true, we will ring the bell. So what have you got for us today? What location are we looking at?
Yeah, this week we're going to talk about the St. James Hotel. Dates all the way back to 1875 as far as a hotel. According to this, it was built in the late 1800s on Native American burial mounds.
Several things there. It was started in 1874, but only finished in 1875. And it was built on ancient Native American burial mounds. It pains me to say this because we're now in a modern 21st century society, but when they were digging the basement out of this building in 1874, they stumbled along the banks there of the Mississippi across Native American burials. And of course, the town of Red Wing, on the border there between Minnesota and Wisconsin, is named Red Wing,
right,
after Chief Red Wing, and there's a huge population, especially back in the day of Dakota Sioux. If you get a chance to go to the museum, which I've investigated many times, it's the Goodhue County Museum. They have an entire area and a floor dedicated to all of the Native American activity that took place there. I've often wondered, because I've investigated this property many, many times, and one of the biggest teams I've ever put together for an investigation, 30 members of my team descended on this building because these buildings are so large, and if you get the run of them, you can pretty much cover a lot of the building without contaminating each other's evidence and throw your net as wide as possible. So this was an investigation I did with my largest team. But I think I've investigated the St. James Hotel probably twice a year for the last 10 years, and we used to bring guests with us, we used to do events there. So this is a building I'm very familiar with. I often wondered that because they dug the bodies out of the basement, I think they threw them in the river. I don't think there was any proper burial. This wouldn't happen now.
Yeah.
But they got rid of those bodies, they threw them away. And I wonder, when you touch the basement wall, if just sitting a couple of feet the other side of that wall is a Native American body. And I think a lot of the activity in this building is due to all of that. You've seen the film Poltergeist, right? Where they dig the swimming pool. Oh, this is a similar situation.
This is America.
But with Native American artifacts and Native American bodies. One of the most interesting things, and I may be preempting your bunkage here, but one of the things it talks about, and one of the things I wanted to look at, is that several people that have worked in the building, several members of staff, have claimed in the basement to see a floating head coming towards them. So this sounds a bit Scooby-Doo, right? You would imagine this, you know, it's Old Man Withers from the amusement arcade. But one of my investigators actually saw this. So I was investigating on the 3rd floor. One of my team came running up and said, "Adrian, Kate's just seen a ghost." So I ran down to the basement. Do you remember in those episodes of Scooby-Doo, you'd see their teeth chattering? Yeah. That actually happens. I've seen that happen. This is true. Your teeth chatter. So the lady was sat there.
Did they jump into each other's arms too?
And then we made a large sandwich in the kitchen, full of like olives and...
The dog started talking. It was crazy.
Madness, I tell you. So she actually saw this head coming down the corridor in the basement, and she was genuinely scared. You can't put that on. She's obviously seen something. If you have a physical reaction, when someone asks you, "Did you see the ghost?" you know, and they're white, their teeth are chattering, they're scared, you have to have seen something, right? Or your brain thinks you've seen something. You're not putting it on at that point. And I said to her, "What did it look like?" And she said it had long, straight black hair, darker coloured skin, and its eyes were just white. And to me, that sounded like a Native American spirit. I wonder if during the process of removing those bodies and just throwing them in the Mississippi in 1874, whether a head came detached from the body when it was thrown in. So now perhaps, and this is just my theory, that head roams looking for the rest of its body. It's the only reason I can come up with. I can't think of another reason why you would see a floating Native American head. But based on the historical research, and that is true, so we'll have a point in the true column, it was finished in 1875, and there is Native American activity in there that I believe came from the fact that they dug out burial mounds to build the basement, and that is true. That is a factual
And I actually,
statement.
and those are actually two separate things from two different sources. I put them together to work it in there. So it actually is 2 points for
you. Mean you've actually bothered to work on this?
I did a little bit of work.
Who knew? Give yourself a point for merging two cut and paste sentences together from the internet. Good job, sir.
Home team.
Awesome.
So we have a lot of information about the actual haunting and the activity, which will be good to speak to with all of your experience.
Yes, so. As I said, I've investigated this building so many times. I know every part of it. I will add to you to say this, that I was very good friends with the booking manager, and he told me that this building is so spiralling and so unique that he's been working there many, many years, 10 to 15 years, and he said he still finds doors and corridors he doesn't know existed, because it gets built on and built on and built on, and then the form is kind of taken on by the fact that it just evolves. It wasn't sat down and designed. When things get added, it's like the Schmidt Brewery. You're familiar as a Minnesotan with the Schmidt Brewery in St. Paul. It's a fantastic building. It looks like a cross between Gotham City and Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Right.
If you wanted an essay on Teutonic Germanic architecture, that would be the building. But it's evolved. It started out as a small building, and with the technology of brewing, which the Germans in Minnesota brought over with them for the lagering techniques, they then added stuff. So when you investigate that building, there's corridors that don't go anywhere, spiral staircases, small doors that don't seem to lead to anywhere, because it's kind of evolved and it wasn't sat down and designed in one go, and stuff has been added. And it has that feel to it. You could get lost in a corridor, you could find a staircase that no one else knows existed, and those things have happened.
And part of that architecture, too, I think it'd be safe to say, can draw the attention of a lot of paranormal or self-proclaimed paranormal experts who want to come and go on a journey.
Yes, there's several crazy houses in America, of course, that were designed specifically with doors that didn't go anywhere or corridors that just ended, because those individuals didn't want the spirits to track them or be attached to them and to follow them around. So that is true.
It reminds me of the Winchester house.
That's the one. That would be a good example. Give yourself another point.
I get another point. See? I know a thing or two.
We're gaining points. You've got more than me. How does that work?
However, I saw the movie. I didn't read the book, so...
It's all valuable information. It's all valuable. Knowledge is power.
According to this source, they had the largest maritime accident that occurred in Red Wing. Many of the passengers also stayed at the hotel. Is how they're kind of tying these two things together.
Read the first sentence again.
Largest maritime accident occurred in Red Wing.
Bunk.
The bell!
Read the second sentence again.
Many passengers also stayed at the hotel.
That is true.
Damn it.
Now, there was a paddle steamer. It was only 3 years old. It was called the Sea Wing. And this took place in 1890. Now, a lot of the passengers were staying at the hotel. Okay. They decided to have a nice pleasure cruise along the Mississippi. So they got onto the paddle steamer. 218 people boarded that paddle steamer. Yeah. As it was working its way down the river, it was going off to the east. There was a shock blast of wind. There was again, we're talking about weather in Minnesota, okay? So as it was starting to turn, the wind suddenly picked up. Because everyone was on the top deck, it was top heavy. So this never happened in Red Wing, but it was boarded in Red Wing. The ship came from Red Wing, and it happened just up the Mississippi River. So kind of in that area, but the people were staying at the hotel. The thing you've got to remember is that lots of people during that period of history couldn't swim.
Sure.
But all of the women on board, they're wearing crinoline, they've got multi-layered dresses on. As soon as they hit the water and the paddle steamer turned over, they sank like stones and they all drowned. So 98 people drowned in that disaster. It is the worst maritime disaster in Minnesotan history. And you would think that would be Lake Superior, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Or one of the bigger lakes, but it's actually that particular disaster. If you go to Red Wing, there's a big stone boulder behind the back of the railway station looking out over the Mississippi at the point it was boarded, and they have a list of all of the people that died, and there's a plaque that memorises and basically eulogises that event as a memorial. Also in the St James, if you go up one of the stairwells, they have a display that you can go and see for free. If you walked in through the lobby, you can see that display to the Sea Wing disaster. But most of those individuals were staying at the hotel. The craziest thing happened to me, one of the craziest things on any paranormal investigation I've ever done. I had a large team with me. We were in the basement. Now, don't think of the basement as being like we've discussed with the Mounds Theatre that was a coal bunker. Don't think of it like the Palmer House that was filled rocks from the 1860s. This basement has banqueting rooms. There's a bar down there and a restaurant. It's really well...
It's a luxurious
It's a luxurious... The term basement makes you think of cobwebs and...
We're not thinking of the typical haunted basement.
Yes, like where you got all of these things from, I would suggest. So it's actually very luxurious. It's certainly very, very posh. So I'm in the basement in the dark with my team. It's a large banqueting room. Over to the bottom left-hand corner that faces the Mississippi, because you could almost see, you know, the Mississippi from the back windows. You only have to walk across the road and it's there. So the river is basically on where the hotel is. We sat there in the darkness and suddenly a fog and a mist appeared at the far end of the basement, a really thick white mist, and it started creeping towards us across this vast space very slowly, and we started to use our laser thermometers to kind of try and penetrate the mist. And we have one of those laser pens that puts a grid up, okay? In fact, that grid pen was very useful. I saw a UFO once doing a paranormal investigation in a graveyard in Redwood Falls, and it was just hovering there, and I said to my team, I've got a laser pen. We can light the entire graveyard up with dots and the UFO will be able to see us. Shall I get it out? No, let's leave it. So we didn't get a chance. Well, you be careful what you wish for. We've had this discussion. Yeah, it's all fun and games now until you're up on a UFO and being probed in various ways. So we saw this fog drifting across the basement. I've never seen anything like it. It was like from a Stephen King novel. And I was running a ghost box and I started to get some conversations going. And I said, are you a collective? Because it looked to me like ghosts coming back to the hotel that had drowned on the Sea Wing disaster, but were coming back to their rooms. So they went off alive, obviously drowned, and then were coming back to the hotel to stay the night, but there was 98 of them and they were all dead and they were walking back en masse. And that was remarkable. And on the ghost box they said, yes, we were on the Sea Wing. And so the ghosts actually backed that up through audio evidence. I can play, it's empirical evidence, and we had that conversation. So we're going to go half bunk, half right. The Sea Wing disaster, worst maritime disaster in Minnesotan history, 98 people dead. Wasn't quite in Red Wing, but that's where they boarded, where the memorial is, and they stayed in the hotel. If you get a chance to go to Red Wing, you can certainly see that plaque, and you can go into the St James and see a little display they've done of that.
Well, one of the facts we have here too, which is actually the next bullet point, is 98 people. So 98 people.
You mean I got that right?
You got that right.
I'm not making this up, sir.
You got it. You nailed that. But that just confirms it's not a bunk.
Well, what you're seeing is some sort of low-level autism that I've had all my life that enables me to remember all this stuff.
Just remember these numbers.
But I couldn't tell you my phone number or my PIN number, so you know it only works with certain things.
Well, and that is a rather specific number.
Okay.
98, not 100. Not
I wasn't going to round it up. I was going to tell you how it was.
Exactly.
Right.
Another point that I found interesting, kind of tying it back to the hotel. St. James Hotel was used as a makeshift morgue. A lot of the people believe the ghosts from that shipwreck still reside in the hotel.
I'd be surprised because they didn't drown at the hotel, did they? They drowned quite a long way.
That is a long swim, ghost or not.
If my memory serves me right, and I'm sure there's people watching this that are going to check this, I think the National Guard were having some sort of encampment and they were going to play a band or some sort of event. So a lot of those people boarded the Sea Wing to go to an army event or a National Guard event further up, and there was going to be a picnic. I'd be surprised if it was used as a morgue because they didn't drown in that spot. Having said that, places like the Palmer House Hotel would have been the only brick building in town that had a cool basement. Basements are great because the temperature tends to stay the same and it's slightly cooler.
Right.
Having had a dig at the Minnesotan weather, you know yourself, in the summer we could be up past 100 degrees, right?
Yeah.
Now the problem with that lies in the fact that if you die in Minnesota, during the winter months, the ground is like concrete, it's frozen solid, right? So what they used to do was light a fire, the gravedigger would light a fire where you were going to be buried, rake the hot coals over that, and it would defrost it enough that they could get your body in the ground. So this is a good technique, this works really well.
Yeah.
That's all very well and good when there's only one person to bury. Imagine during a pandemic, which seems to be current at the moment, but imagine...
Relevant.
In 1918, the Spanish flu, if 1/3 of the people in that town died and it's during the winter, they can't put the bodies in the ground because they can't light enough fires and there's not enough manpower to make that happen.
Yeah.
So I think there are basements around Minnesota, including the Palmer House, what would have been used as a makeshift morgue because they've got a back job of bodies to bury and they have to light fires to get them in the ground. And as you know, most pandemics, influenza happens in winter, right? So these things have to be considered. I have no historical record of that ever happening, so I'm going to ring the bell.
Okay.
Because I don't think we've rung it enough.
It's
more than
right. I
anything.
think we can.
It was time, wasn't it?
So it's possible that it was maybe a morgue, not necessarily a morgue that would have held the shipwreck.
I know of buildings in Minnesota that have been used as morgues, so I could see that happening. Another one, for example, would be the last contact between the Native American Indians and the US Army at the turn of the last century at the Battle of Sugar Point on Leech Lake. So the Chase on the Lake Hotel was where the soldiers set off from on their boat. They didn't understand how the Native Americans knew they were coming when they decided to attack them in 2 paddle steamers, which are belching smoke, make a lot of noise, and they can see them from miles away. But all of the soldiers that died during that interaction, they did actually use the basement of the Chase on the Lake Hotel until they could get the bodies back to Fort Snelling. So there'd be another example of a hotel being used as a makeshift morgue. Sure. I have no historical research to say that's true or false, but it has happened. Right. So I kind of want to, maybe I can do that.
There you
maybe
go.
half a bunk, a bar.
We just like to hear it. I think everybody likes to hear it.
It's like Pavlov's dog. I ring the bell, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
Is my dinner ready?
Tea, please. I didn't do it, though.
Wow. I warned you. How many times?
I just got close. I didn't touch it.
I need some sort of stick or something.
So we've hit on a lot of the history. There's still a couple little tidbits here, but I think we should take a break and talk about some of the activity.
The paranormal activity.
Paranormal activity. I mean, that's what it's about, right? And as you've said, you've done a lot of investigating here. So let's talk about some of the ghosts. I remember reading a lot about this on several sources about a gentleman in his overalls who has been known to haunt not any one particular part of the facility, but it's apparently known that he fell to his death during the building of the hotel.
I have nothing historical to back that up.
Really?
This isn't the first time someone has allegedly fallen off of a building. I investigated the Bark Center, which is in Windham in Cottonwood County. It was a school built in 1933. The local legend was that a gentleman fell off the roof and died. I literally spent months in their historical society turning every page. And you've got to remember that some of these local newspapers in small towns back in the day would have a headline like, you know, Mrs. Johnson's carrots are doing well this year, or a billfold found in the road, come to the office. It's a piece of paper folded in half. Nothing happens in these small towns in Minnesota back in the day. The point I'm making, that if someone fell off the roof and died, it would be everywhere. You would find that. That would be the biggest news event in 20 years of this town, and I have nothing to back that up. I can't find that. Someone may come back at some point and say, look, I found it, at which point we say, OK, we can add that to the canon of Minnesotan history. But as it stands at the moment, I would find that hard to believe. It would be documented somewhere.
Give the people what they want.
You want? There you go. You're a teaser.
So we will throw that in the fiction category.
One thing I will say that we've not touched upon is when you go through the doors into the old lobby of the St. James Hotel, you have terrible drainage of power. All of the cells on my cameras, my IR equipment, my FLIR, everything suddenly goes dead. You know, I've gone through bags and bags of batteries. Everything suddenly dies. The moment you walk in, it's so vampiric for energy, that building. It's quite remarkable. I had to keep all of the batteries in my car so I wouldn't keep having to renew them all, and I would go back in again with a new set. So that's a remarkable thing. And whilst we're talking about the old lobby, this is a really fun reason to go to the hotel. If you go into the old section, there's a giant pipe organ. They've then got the dining room, and I suspect we're going to touch upon that in a moment. But when you go into the library, if you go into the library and look to your left, there's a photograph on the wall. And it's all the original members of the Red Wing Shoe Company that built the hotel, the original investors. Some of them were other investors, but all of the original sort of 12, 14 gentlemen that were rich local citizens that put money in to build this hotel. There's a photograph of them in black and white.
Yeah.
And they're exactly how you'd imagine. They've got the pencil moustaches twirled up with the top hats, all looking very Victorian. There's a gentleman sat at the front, and he's got a pair of dark glasses on, and he's kind of sitting there slumped in his chair. He is dead. The gentleman died, and they decided that they wanted a photograph of all the original investors for this hotel together because they didn't have one.
Yeah.
And they took a photograph and slumped him at the front in a chair. And if you look at that photograph, he is dead. You know he's dead because he's the only one in the photograph who's not out of focus. Because back in the day, they had to have quite a long exposure time, and he's not moving, strangely enough, and everybody else is. So if you get a chance to see that, go and see the photograph on the wall in the library. The gentleman sitting at the front, in focus with the glasses on, is dead.
Which seemed to be back, and as a historian, maybe you can weigh in, but that seemed to be not a terribly uncommon thing back then, to have deceased people in photographs.
Yes, memento mori, they're called. People, sometimes the only photograph you would have of someone is someone that was dead. So this was a tradition back in the Victorian period. A lot of these photographs are very, very expensive now. So just to give you a tip, because we're here to give information and people are supposed to leave with more than they arrive with. If you go to an antique shop or a junk shop or a thrift shop and you see one of those old Victorian photo albums where all the photos are black and white and it's just a couple of dollars, if you flick through that and you see a dead person, that is worth a large sum of money, and I would pay the couple of dollars just to buy that album because it had that photograph in it. See? Money-making opportunities. But that is all true. Who would have
thought that this would have been educational in the way of making income?
Yes, I certainly, when I sat down here, the last thing I thought this would be educational.
According to multiple sources, the third floor.
Multiple sources.
Multiple sources
Google.
On the interwebs.
I see what's happening. Yahoo search,
Of which I have done extensive
Wikipedia,
research. Third floor, most haunted and most ghost sightings.
Outside of the basement, that is true. Do you know why that's true, sir? Why the third floor would be the most haunted? That is the floor
I'm going to find out.
They lived on. The people that ran the hotel had accommodation on the top floor. So that's where most people would be, because they lived in the building. So even in the off-season, perhaps when there wasn't many people there, that was the location they would live in. So
probably more of a residual sense.
That's correct. So that would be their accommodation. I've recorded dogs barking, dead, ghostly dogs, because it's their family pets, and they're having a more kind of social environment. You know, in a hotel, you might, have your dinner, go to bed, wake up, have a shower, and leave in the morning. They're residing 24/7, having arguments, putting energy into the walls. By the way, never have an argument in your bedroom, because that's where you relax. That's where you want to go to sleep, and it's like a sponge, isn't it? You soak that up. If you want a good argument with your betrothed, obviously go into another room would be my advice.
Usually my wife and I both fall asleep before we have a chance to even begin an argument.
What you should have said is we never have arguments. That would have been the way to go, sir, but who am I to tell you?
So we say then, in that case, that would be...
True.
We would give that a point for the true.
Yeah.
All right.
That's not good news. Well, it is for you, not for me necessarily.
Man, the internet.
Well, one of the things I'm going to add is that in the dining room, the lady that owned the hotel was called Clara Lilybad, which is a fabulous name. She married a gentleman called Charles. They met in 1914 in the restaurant of the St. James. Charles Lilybad owned the hotel.
Okay.
She delivered his dinner and gave him his... and delivered a lot more, allegedly. But they got married and they had a son called Art. and she moves things around in the dining room. She doesn't like the way the waitstaff have left things out, the knives and forks, the napkins, the wine glasses and so forth.
Right.
So we did a lot of experiments by putting out a setting, and stuff did move around. And these are big, giant walnut tables. You know, you wouldn't be able to lift them on your own. When I was moving bits and pieces around for my equipment and my cameras, it took 3 or 4 of us to carry these tables into the places we wanted them to. So the fact that the table vibrates, the fact that you get a lot of EMF activity is quite remarkable when you consider that these are quite hefty pieces of Victorian furniture. So Clara would be a lady that would move things around. But again, that's quite common in hotels. In the Palmer House Hotel, the waitstaff have claimed that they would go back to where they've laid out the dinner table for dinner, and Christina Palmer would have moved things around. So that's quite a common phenomenon in hotels in this part of the world.
Okay, and I remember reading the name, the Lilybad name, and the one,
Yes.
I guess the one piece of information we have on this, we probably have a lot of information that's not on here, and that's why it's good that we have you.
Awesome.
But it says that Charles Lilybad bought the hotel in 1905, and the Lilybad family ran it until the Red Wing Shoe Company, which I'm assuming means took over.
That is true. That happened, well, Clara died in the 1970s, and her son Art ran it until 1977. So I'm going to bunk that.
Okay.
It's semi-true, but it wasn't her right up until that moment. She died. I mean, she's going to be very old lady
Yeah.
at this point. And then the Red Wing Shoe Company took that over. So her son was running it from a while. The first people to own the hotel in 1875, their last name was Blood, and there were 2 brothers, and they were called the Blood Brothers, which I thought was
we have
quite
that on here
amusing.
too.
Well, there you go. I know what I'm doing.
Ed and Fred, as
Ed
the
and
newspapers called them.
Ed and Fred Blood.
Ed and Fred Blood. If that's not a horror movie in and of itself, I don't know.
I'll tell you what's remarkable, and this will never ever be beaten, that in 102 years of the St James Hotel, it had 2 owners, the Blood Brothers and the Lilybads. When would that ever happen? When would you have a business that's only owned, especially a hotel owned by 2 people, for 102 years is a remarkable thing.
That is pretty interesting.
Any rooms that we want to look at there? What's the most-
Let's hit the last one we'll hit on here, because I think you hit those. So, Ed and Fred, I mean, I think we're going to have to give that one to the internet.
Okay, it disappoints me. I'd rather win against the internet.
Yeah, but you're hitting on the right stuff. I think we talked about the most haunted floor.
Right.
Specifically, we're going to talk about a room 210. Apparently the most haunted room in the facility.
Yes, originally this was used as a ballroom for the Red Wing Shoe Company. And so it's laid out a bit like a ballroom with leather walls. All the walls are leather because obviously the Red Wing Shoe Company has the opportunity to put leather wherever it wants. I mean, can you imagine the amount of leather they must get through? But it's very posh. I believe Eisenhower may have stayed there. That was the rumour, although I've not found anything to back that up. Am I actually adding to some urban myth there? This is confusing for me. So it's an amazing room, 4-poster bed, open fire, very luxurious. It's almost like their presidential suite. It's the most expensive room in the hotel. And one thing springs to mind, which is poltergeist activity. I was doing investigations in this room, so I set up all the equipment, all of the recording devices. I went back downstairs into the dining room where my team was setting up, and we had that as a controlled area. I then went back upstairs just to check to make sure everything was in place. On the bed was a very small St Mary's medallion, like you'd wear for good luck. You get them for Archangel Michael. This one was St Mary. Who is your patron saint, by the way? Patron saint of America is St Mary. I believe that's December, maybe the 12th. That springs to mind.
Yeah.
So I found this little medallion. It wasn't there before. I came back downstairs and said to my team, we need to get in here. We need to measure the energy. We need to see what's going on in this room. As we came back upstairs, and there's only 5 minutes between me finding it and bringing the team back up, another St Mary's medallion appeared on the rug that wasn't there before. So I now have 2. So I think what may have happened is that ghosts and spirits are ethereal. They don't have a physical body. So they can't just steal things and take them with them into their world. I think they hid them almost like a cuckoo would do.
Right.
So, for example, someone has left that medallion in the past. The ghost and spirit has taken it, hidden it somewhere in the hotel, and you can hide anything anywhere. Top of picture frames, under rugs, and they brought it back specifically to give me a message, and they did that twice with those particular items. And I stayed in one of the rooms on the 3rd floor, and my watch disappeared. I left my watch on the bedside cabinet. I woke up in the morning and it was gone, and I thought, I wonder what happened, I wonder where it went. I went and had breakfast, because the first thing an Englishman needs to do before he thinks about poltergeist activity is have a cup of tea, right? I came back half an hour later and the watch reappeared on the bedside cabinet. So the ghosts and spirits do have a habit of taking things,
moving things
and
around,
bringing them back again. And I don't think they take them with them. How would you take a physical object into the spirit world? But they can certainly hide stuff and bring stuff back at any given time.
That's interesting. So I think it's time for us to do our final tally here again. It seems like the internet has a way of being more credible than our show would like it to be.
I'm going to step in there and say that may be true, but the things it gets wrong are huge things.
That's fair.
So it may not get everything right, but the 1 or 2 things it gets wrong are quite major and are quite kind of sticking in terms of historical research, I would suggest.
I would agree with that.
What are the scores?
So we have a final tally of 6 confirmed on the side of fact.
Right.
So some good stuff there. 4 is our final tally.
It's
for the
not
fiction.
too bad, 40%.
The scores are evening a little more, I think, as we go along here. So it's pretty good. So as we should plug your book real quick. You've written several books, including one of my favorites, Mysterious Minnesota. Where can people pick these up?
They can find them on Amazon, all good e-book stores, and your local bookshop should be stocking that as well. And the last chapter of that particular book is on the St. James Hotel, all the photographs of the ghost, all of the history, all of my experiences. Half an hour doesn't do it justice, does it? I've got so many more notes we could do.
I don't believe we've been talking as long as we have.
We need a DVD extras, that's what we need. We'll make that happen.
Yeah.
Well, all good things come to an end. Thank you for watching our episode of Paranormal Fact or Fiction. Be sure to join us next time for another exciting, haunted, spooky, bizarre and surreal episode. It just remains for me to say, be interested and interesting. Goodbye.